Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to weigh your choices. It doesn't demand you justify what you've done or left undone. It simply invites you to lie still and let your heart take inventory at its own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of ledger, a place where joy and regret sit side by side without competing, where accomplishments and failures lose their sharp edges, where the life you've lived reveals itself honestly, not in the harsh light of judgment, but in the soft darkness of acceptance. Later in life, the mind doesn't calculate the way it once did. It assesses, it reconciles, it holds two truths simultaneously: that you did your best and that your best wasn't always enough, that you found profound joy and also caused real pain, that your life has been both more and less than you imagined it would be. This space is for that honest accounting, the inventory you can only take when you're alone with yourself, resting in the dark, adding up the columns of what brought you happiness and what brings you sorrow. Not to punish yourself, not to celebrate prematurely, but simply to see clearly, to know what you've carried, to understand what you're still carrying. So take a slow breath. Let your body settle into the mattress and allow this night to help you count what matters. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. You're lying in bed right now, and the day has released you. The demands have quieted. The roles you play have been set aside. There's just you and the darkness and the silent tallying that happens when everything else falls away. This is the inventory hour, the time when your mind naturally begins to count. Not obsessively, not frantically, but with the steady patience of someone who's lived long enough to know that life is always both wonderful and terrible, always simultaneously precious and painful, always a mixture that can't be separated into neat categories. You think about joy first, because joy is easier to hold, lighter to carry, sweeter to remember. You remember mornings that felt like gifts, waking up beside someone you loved and feeling their warmth before you even opened your eyes. Those mornings when you knew, absolutely knew, that you were exactly where you belonged, that your life had brought you to this perfect moment of simple contentment. You remember the sound of your children laughing. If you had children, that particular pitch of pure delight that children produce before the world teaches them to moderate their happiness. You remember how that sound could lift your entire day, how it could make everything else that was difficult feel manageable, how it proved that you'd created something good, something that could experience joy freely and fully. You remember achievements that mattered, not the ones other people celebrated necessarily, but the ones that felt significant to you. The project you completed despite obstacles. The skill you mastered through persistence. The goal you reached after years of working toward it. The moment you realized you'd become someone you could respect. You remember friendships that sustained you, the people who showed up, who stayed, who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. You remember conversations that lasted hours, laughter that made your stomach ache, silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward, the particular warmth of being known completely and still being wanted. You remember places that felt like home, not necessarily the houses you lived in, but the spaces where you felt most yourself. A particular chair where you read countless books, a trail you walked every weekend, a coffee shop where the barista knew your order, a city that embraced you, a landscape that calmed you, places where your soul could rest. You remember moments of beauty that stopped you completely, sunsets that made you pull over to the side of the road just to watch, music that moved you to tears without warning, art that shifted something fundamental in how you understood the world, nature displaying itself with such magnificence that you felt privileged just to witness it. You remember kindness you received when you desperately needed it, the stranger who helped you when you were lost, the friend who sat with you through grief, the family member who forgave you, the colleague who defended you, the neighbor who checked on you, small acts and large ones, all of them proving that people could be good, that humanity contained grace. You remember love in all its forms, romantic love that made you feel chosen, parental love that made you feel essential, friendship love that made you feel understood, the love of being part of something larger than yourself, the love that asked nothing in return except that you exist. You remember your body when it worked well, when you could run without thinking about your knees, when you could lift without worrying about your back, when energy was abundant and pain was temporary and you took for granted the miracle of a body that simply functioned. You remember dancing, hiking, making love with abandon, moving through the world with confidence in your physical self. You remember learning, the excitement of understanding something new, the satisfaction of a skill finally clicking into place, the expansion that happens when knowledge opens doors you didn't know existed. You remember teachers who believed in you, books that changed you, experiences that educated you in ways no classroom could. You remember being needed, having purpose, knowing your presence mattered, that your work contributed something valuable, that your care made a difference in someone's life, that you weren't just taking up space, but actually adding something meaningful to the world. You remember freedom, the first time you made your own choice without needing permission, the moment you realized you could leave a situation that wasn't serving you, the day you understood that your life belonged to you, that you had agency, that you could shape your own existence. You remember hope, believing things would work out, planning for a future that seemed bright, feeling optimistic about possibilities, having dreams that seemed achievable, trusting that your efforts would lead somewhere good, waking up excited about what might happen. These joys live in you still. They're part of your permanent record. They happened. They were real. No amount of subsequent difficulty can erase them. They count, they matter. They prove that your life has contained genuine happiness, real connection, authentic meaning. You take inventory of these joys and you feel grateful, truly grateful. You could have had less. So many people have had less. You've been fortunate in ways that weren't guaranteed, ways you didn't necessarily earn. You received grace. You experienced beauty. You knew love. This gratitude sits warm in your chest as you lie here in the dark. It's a good weight, a welcome weight. Evidence that life gave you gifts, that you were present enough to receive them, that you allowed yourself to feel joy when it arrived. But there's always a but. The inventory isn't complete with only the joys listed. You shift slightly in bed. The comfort you felt a moment ago becomes tinged with something heavier because you know what comes next in this accounting. You know what else lives in the ledger. The regrets. They're there too. They've always been there, waiting patiently for nighttime, for darkness, for the moment when you're alone and honest and can't distract yourself from what you know. You think about the people you hurt, not strangers, people you loved, people who trusted you. You remember the words you said in anger that you can never take back, the tone you used, the way you watched their face change as your cruelty landed. How you knew, in that moment, you were damaging something precious, but you said it anyway. You caused that pain deliberately. You remember the times you were selfish, when you chose your comfort over someone else's need, when you knew what the right thing was but did the easier thing instead, when you put yourself first in situations where love required sacrifice, when you protected yourself at someone else's expense. You remember the promises you broke, not just small ones, significant ones. I'll be there. I'll help you. I'll change. I'll try harder. I love you. I'm committed. Words you meant when you said them. Or maybe you didn't mean them. Maybe you said what you needed to say to get what you wanted. Either way, you didn't follow through. You left people holding expectations you created and then abandoned. You remember the people you abandoned, not dramatically, not with a big exit, just slowly, gradually. You stopped calling, stopped showing up, let the relationship drift until it disappeared. People who mattered to you once, people who probably still think about you sometimes and wonder why you left. You tell yourself you were busy. Life got complicated. You meant to reach out, but the truth is, you chose not to. You let them go because maintaining the connection required effort you weren't willing to give. You remember the opportunities you wasted, the chances you didn't take because fear was louder than courage, the risks you didn't accept because safety felt more important than growth, the doors that opened that you didn't walk through, the invitations you declined, the possibilities you dismissed, the life you could have lived if you'd been braver. You remember your cowardice in moments that required strength, times when someone needed you to stand up for them and you stayed silent, when injustice happened in front of you and you looked away, when you knew someone was being hurt and you didn't intervene because it wasn't your business or because getting involved seemed too costly. Your silence was complicity. Your inaction was a choice. You know this. You remember the lies you told. Some big, some small. All of them eroding trust, creating false realities, manipulating situations to your advantage. You justified them. Everyone lies sometimes. White lies don't hurt. The truth would have been worse. But lying changed you, made you someone who couldn't be fully trusted, someone who chose convenience over integrity. You remember your addictions, the things you used to avoid feeling. Alcohol, work, shopping, food, sex, technology, anger, whatever substance or behavior you employed to numb yourself, to escape, to not be present. You hurt people during those times. You weren't available. You weren't reliable. You were chasing oblivion instead of showing up for life. You remember your jealousy and resentment, how you couldn't celebrate other people's success because you were too busy feeling bitter about your own perceived failures, how you diminished their achievements, how you found ways to undermine their happiness, how your envy poisoned relationships and revealed something ugly in your character. You remember your judgment, how harshly you evaluated others, how quick you were to criticize, how you held people to standards you didn't meet yourself, how you made people feel small with your disapproval, how you used judgment as a way to elevate yourself, to feel superior, to avoid examining your own shortcomings. You remember the times you were cruel to yourself, the negative self-talk that was vicious, the way you denied yourself kindness, how you punished yourself for being human, for making mistakes, for not being perfect. The internal violence you committed against yourself day after day, year after year. You remember the people you took for granted, your parents maybe, before they were gone. You thought there would be more time, more chances to appreciate them, to tell them what they meant to you, to repair what was broken. But time ran out. And now you carry the weight of what you didn't say, what you didn't do, the love you didn't express while it still mattered. You remember your partner in moments when you weren't your best self, when you were impatient, dismissive, unavailable, taking them for granted, expecting them to simply be there without nurturing the connection, without doing the work, without showing up fully. You remember their face when they realized you weren't really present, when they understood they were alone even though you were right there. You remember your children, if you had them, the moments you were too tired, too stressed, too focused on other things, when they needed you and you gave them distraction instead of attention, when they asked questions and you gave short answers, when they wanted to show you something and you barely looked, when they were small and time was moving fast and you didn't appreciate it, didn't savor it, didn't realize how quickly they'd grow and how much you'd miss those years once they were gone. You remember choosing work over people repeatedly, missing events, breaking plans, being physically present but mentally absent, prioritizing achievement over relationship, success over connection, telling yourself you were doing it for them, to provide, to build a future. But really you were doing it because the work was easier than intimacy, because professional accomplishment felt more controllable than emotional vulnerability. You remember the grudges you held, the forgiveness you withheld, the way you made people pay for hurting you. how you kept score, reminded them of their failures, refused to let wounds heal because your pain felt important, because being right felt better than being in relationship, because you chose punishment over reconciliation. You remember your pride, how it prevented apologies, how it kept you from admitting fault, how it made you defend positions you knew were wrong just because backing down felt like losing, how it damaged relationships that could have been repaired if you'd been willing to be humble, to be wrong, to prioritize connection over ego. You remember missed chances to say I love you, I'm proud of you, thank you, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you matter to me. Simple words that would have meant everything, that would have changed things that people needed to hear. But you stayed silent, held back, assumed there would be another opportunity. There wasn't always another opportunity. You remember the ways you were absent from your own life, going through motions, not fully present, not engaged, letting years pass in a blur of routine and distraction, not paying attention, not appreciating, not being awake to your own existence. And now those years are gone. You can't get them back. You can't relive them more consciously. They're just gone. You remember times your fear made you small, made you play it safe, made you decline invitations to fully live, made you hide your true self, made you pretend to be less than you were so others wouldn't feel threatened, made you apologize for taking up space, made you diminish your own light. These regrets are heavy, much heavier than the joys. They sit on your chest as you lie here. They make breathing slightly harder. They create an ache that's both familiar and unwelcome. You want to push them away, to think about something else, to fall asleep before the accounting becomes too painful. But you've learned that avoiding the inventory doesn't make it go away. It just postpones it. The regrets wait patiently. They'll be here tomorrow night and the night after. They're permanent residents now. So you let them be present. You acknowledge them. You face them in the darkness. You hurt people. You made mistakes. You failed in ways that mattered. You weren't who you wanted to be. You didn't live up to your own values consistently. You caused damage. You created pain. You contributed to suffering. This is true. This is part of your record. This is what you carry. But here's what you're learning as you lie here, taking inventory. Here's what the years have taught you. Here's what this nighttime accounting is really about. The joys and the regrets aren't separate columns that you can tally independently. They're not competing. They're not canceling each other out. They're both true simultaneously. They're both real. They're both you. You're the person who experienced profound love and also hurt people you loved. You're the person who received kindness and also withheld it. You're the person who created beauty and also caused damage. You're the person who tried your best and also failed repeatedly. You're not good or bad. You're not successful or failed. You're not redeemed or condemned. You're human. Fully, completely, messily human. The inventory you're taking tonight isn't meant to reach a verdict. It's not meant to determine whether your life has been worthwhile or wasted, whether you deserve peace or punishment, whether you should feel satisfied, or ashamed. It simply meant to reveal the truth, the whole truth. Both sides of the ledger existing together. You did bring joy into the world. You also caused pain. You experienced beautiful moments. You also created ugly ones. You loved well sometimes. You loved poorly other times. You showed up. You also disappeared. You were brave. You were cowardly. You were generous. You were selfish. You were present. You were absent. All of it is true. None of it can be erased or ignored. This is the full inventory of a human life. And what you're discovering as you lie here in the dark is that this completeness is actually what makes life meaningful. The fact that it contains both. The fact that you're capable of both. The fact that joy and regret coexist in the same heart, the same history, the same person. If you'd experienced only joy, you wouldn't have depth. You wouldn't have wisdom. You wouldn't understand the weight of choices or the complexity of being human. You'd be shallow, untested, naive about what life actually requires. If you'd experienced only regret, you'd be crushed. You wouldn't be able to continue. You wouldn't have hope or resilience or any reason to keep trying. You'd have surrendered long ago. But you have both. You carry both. You've earned both. The joys prove you were open enough to receive beauty, that you allowed yourself to connect, that you participated in life rather than merely observing it, that you were vulnerable enough to love and be loved, that you said yes when yes was possible. The regrets prove you have a conscience, that you care about your impact on others, that you hold yourself accountable, that you recognize your failures rather than denying them, that you've grown enough to see what you couldn't see when you were younger, that you're still developing, still learning, still becoming. Both of these prove you're alive, really alive, not just existing, but actually living a full human life with all its complications and contradictions and impossible choices. You shift in bed again, finding a more comfortable position, letting this understanding settle into your body, feeling how the weight of both joy and regret can be carried without breaking you. You think about forgiveness, not the kind others need to give you. You can't control that. Some people will forgive you, others won't. That's their right, their choice, their journey. You think about the forgiveness you need to give yourself. This is harder, so much harder, because you know what you did. You know what you didn't do. You can't pretend. You can't minimize. You can't explain it away. You were there. You remember. But maybe forgiveness doesn't mean pretending your failures didn't happen. Maybe it doesn't mean excusing yourself, or lowering your standards, or deciding that harm doesn't matter. Maybe forgiveness means accepting that you're human, that humans fail, that failure is part of the curriculum, that you've been both the person who wounds and the person who's wounded, that you've been the problem and the solution, the hero and the villain, the person who showed up and the person who ran away. Maybe forgiveness means understanding that you did your best with what you knew at the time, that you were operating with limited information, limited emotional capacity, limited wisdom, that you were carrying your own wounds when you wounded others, that hurt people, that you were doing the best you could, even when your best wasn't good enough. This doesn't erase the harm. It doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give you permission to stop trying to do better. But it does allow you to be human, to be imperfect, to exist in the messy middle where most of life actually happens. You take a deep breath, hold it, release it slowly. The inventory continues. It will continue every night probably. This is what nighttime is for at this age, this gentle accounting, this honest assessment, this holding of both truths simultaneously. But tonight, lying here in the darkness, you're starting to understand something crucial, something that changes how you hold the whole ledger. Your life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. Your record doesn't need to be spotless to be valuable. Your choices don't need to be flawless to be worthy of compassion. You're building a life in real time, with real limitations, real complications, real competing values, real impossible situations where every choice causes some kind of harm. You're doing this without a manual, without perfect information, without knowing how things will turn out, without being able to see all the consequences of your actions. You're doing this while wounded yourself, while carrying your own pain, while trying to heal from your own history, while learning as you go. And you're doing this in relationship with other imperfect humans who are also figuring it out, who also make mistakes, who also cause harm, who also regret, who also hope they're doing better than they fear they are. The nighttime inventory of joys and regrets isn't meant to torture you. It's meant to help you see clearly, to understand the full truth, to hold your complete self with honesty and compassion, to recognize that you're worthy of love despite your failures, that you're capable of growth despite your mistakes, that you deserve peace despite your regrets. You're here, you're breathing, you're still trying. You're taking inventory, not to punish yourself, but to understand yourself, to know yourself fully, to accept yourself completely. This is enough. You are enough. Your imperfect, complicated, joy-filled, regret-laden life is enough. You're still lying here, still breathing, still taking inventory in the gentle darkness. The weight of both joy and regret has settled into something you can carry, something that feels true rather than crushing. You think about the people who hurt you, the ones you've been counting in your own ledger of pain received, because the inventory isn't only about what you did, it's also about what was done to you, what you survived, what you carried, what shaped you in ways you didn't choose. You remember betrayals that shattered your trust, people who promised loyalty and delivered abandonment, people who said they loved you and then demonstrated that their version of love included conditions you couldn't meet, people who saw your vulnerability and used it as a weapon rather than treating it as the gift it was. You remember being lied to, believing someone completely and then discovering the truth was entirely different. The particular pain of realizing you'd been living in a false reality, that while you were being authentic, they were performing, that your trust was misplaced, that you were a fool for believing. You remember emotional manipulation, the ways people twisted your perceptions, made you doubt your own experience, convinced you that your feelings were wrong or excessive or evidence of your brokenness, how they used your love against you, how they made you responsible for their happiness while taking no responsibility for yours. You remember being diminished. People who made themselves bigger by making you smaller, who couldn't celebrate your success, who found subtle ways to undermine your confidence, who needed you to stay weak so they could feel strong, who resented your growth because it threatened their control. You remember being abandoned when you needed people most, friends who disappeared during your crisis, family who couldn't handle your pain, partners who left when things got difficult. The particular loneliness of reaching out and finding no one there, of needing help and receiving silence. You remember being judged harshly, people who couldn't extend grace, who held your mistakes against you permanently, who couldn't forgive, who reminded you constantly of your failures, who made you feel like you could never be good enough, never be redeemed, never deserve their acceptance. You remember being used, people who pretended to care but really just wanted something from you, your time, your money, your connections, your body, your validation, and once they got what they wanted, they moved on. You were a resource to be extracted, not a person to be valued. You remember prejudice and discrimination. If you experienced it, the ways people judged you based on things you couldn't control and shouldn't have to defend. Your gender, your race, your sexuality, your age, your appearance, your background. Being treated as less than, being denied opportunities, being made to feel like you didn't belong. You remember violence, if you experienced it, physical harm, sexual violation, the terror of being hurt by someone stronger, the helplessness, the shame that followed even though you did nothing wrong, the ways your body remembered what your mind tried to forget, the nightmares, the triggers, the permanent changes to how safe you feel in the world. These things happen to you. They're part of your inventory too. They're wounds you carry, scars that shaped you, pain that changed the trajectory of your life in ways you didn't choose and couldn't prevent. And here's what's complicated about nighttime inventory. Here's what makes it so difficult. You have to hold multiple truths simultaneously. You were hurt, and you hurt others. You were wronged, and you wronged people. You were the victim, and you were the perpetrator. Both are true. Both happened. Neither cancels out the other. The pain you experienced doesn't excuse the pain you caused. Your wounds don't justify your wounding of others. Being hurt doesn't give you permission to hurt. This is hard to accept, but it's true. At the same time, the pain you caused doesn't erase the pain you experienced. Your failures don't mean you deserved mistreatment. Your mistakes don't justify what was done to you. Being imperfect doesn't mean you should have been harmed. You hold both. The harm you received and the harm you gave. The compassion you deserve for what you survived and the accountability you owe for what you did. The understanding that you were wounded and the recognition that wounded people can wound others. This is the full inventory, the complete picture. It's not simple. It's not clean. It doesn't resolve into a clear verdict of innocent or guilty. It's messy and complicated and human. You shift in bed again, adjusting the pillow, pulling the covers a little higher. Your body is tired, but your mind is still working, still processing, still trying to make sense of a lifetime of choices and consequences. You think about the concept of enough. whether you've done enough good to balance the harm, whether you've suffered enough to have earned peace, whether you've grown enough to deserve forgiveness, whether you've loved enough to justify having been loved. This accounting mentality is so deeply ingrained. This need to tally, to measure, to determine whether you come out ahead or behind, whether your life has been net positive or net negative, whether you've earned your place or taken up space you didn't deserve. But maybe this isn't the right framework. Maybe life isn't a ledger that needs to balance. Maybe you're not meant to earn your worth through accomplishment or lose it through failure. Maybe the whole paradigm of deserving is flawed. You exist. You're here. You were born into this world without choosing it. You were given a particular body, a particular family, a particular set of circumstances. You were shaped by forces beyond your control. You developed wounds you didn't ask for. You inherited patterns you didn't choose. You were taught lessons that may or may not have been true. Then you lived. You made choices with limited information and limited capacity. You tried things. You failed at things. You hurt and were hurt. You loved and were loved. You created and destroyed. You built and broke. You connected and disconnected. You showed up and hid. You were brave and cowardly. You were generous and selfish. You were all of it. And now you're here, taking inventory, trying to understand what it all means, and trying to determine whether your life has been worthwhile, whether you've been a good person, whether you deserve to rest peacefully or should lie awake in guilt and shame. But what if the question isn't whether you deserve peace? What if peace isn't something you earn? What if it's something you allow, something you choose, something you grant yourself, not because you've proven worthy, but because you're human and humans need rest? You take another deep breath, feeling it fill your lungs, feeling your chest rise and fall. This simple act that your body performs thousands of times a day without you thinking about it. This miracle of being alive that you take for granted until you can't anymore. You think about time, how it only moves forward, how you can't go back and redo things, how the choices you made are permanent, how the words you spoke can't be unspoken, how the actions you took can't be undone, how the time you wasted is simply gone. This finality is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because you can't fix what's broken. You can't repair every relationship you damaged. You can't recover every opportunity you missed. You can't become the person you wish you'd been. But liberating because you don't have to carry the impossible burden of changing the past. You can't. It's done. It's finished. It exists as fact now, not as choice. The inventory of what happened is complete. No amount of regret will alter it. What you can change is what you do with the time that remains. How you carry this inventory forward. Whether you allow it to crush you or teach you. Whether you use your regrets as evidence that you're worthless or as information about what you value. Whether you let your failures define you or refine you. You think about the people you want to make amends to, the relationships you want to repair, the apologies you want to offer, the acknowledgement of harm you want to give. Some of these amends are possible. The people are still alive, still accessible. You could reach out. You could say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hurt you. I see that now. I wish I'd done better. You were right to be angry. You deserved better from me." These words might be received well. They might open a door. They might allow healing, or they might not. The person might not be interested in your apology, might not trust it, might not want contact, might have moved on and preferred to leave the past where it is. You can't control their response. You can only control your action. And maybe part of the inventory is recognizing that making amends is something you do for yourself as much as for them. It's about integrity, about living in alignment with your values now, even if you didn't before. About being the person today who takes responsibility, even if yesterday you avoided it. Other amends aren't possible. The people are gone, dead or unreachable. The opportunity has passed. You'll never get to say what you need to say, never get to repair what you broke, never get to demonstrate that you've changed and grown and learned. This is perhaps the heaviest part of the inventory. The permanent incompleteness, the inability to make things right, the knowledge that you'll carry this regret forever because there's no way to resolve it. All you can do is honor those people by living differently, by not making the same mistakes with new people, by applying what you learned through losing them, by allowing your regret to make you more careful, more present, more appreciative of the relationships you still have. You think about your parents. If they're still alive, you think about calling them more, visiting more, asking questions about their lives while you still can, telling them you love them without waiting for the perfect moment, making sure they know they matter to you. If they're gone, you think about what you wish you'd said, what you wish you'd asked, what you wish you'd understood while there was still time. You think about forgiveness you withheld, conversations you avoided, affection you didn't express, time you didn't spend. You can't fix this now. You can only feel it. Only acknowledge that you missed chances that won't come again. Only admit that you took them for granted. Only recognize that you thought there would be more time and you were wrong. This hurts. It will always hurt. But the hurt is information. It's teaching you something crucial about how to live the time you have left, about what matters, about what you'll regret if you don't change your patterns now. You think about your children if you have them, whether you told them enough times that you're proud of them, that you love them unconditionally, that their existence brings you joy, that they don't have to earn your approval, that you see them, really see them, not who you want them to be, but who they actually are. You think about whether you apologize to them for the ways you failed as a parent, whether you acknowledged your shortcomings, whether you released them from the responsibility of managing your emotions or meeting your unmet needs, whether you've allowed them to be separate people with their own lives, rather than extensions of yourself. If they're young still, you have time. You can do better starting now. You can break patterns. You can repair damage. You can show up differently. This is grace. If they're grown and distant, you think about whether the distance is necessary for their health or whether it's distance you created through your choices, whether you respected their boundaries or violated them, whether you've earned their trust or proven yourself unreliable, whether they feel safe with you or need to protect themselves from you, This is painful to examine, especially at night, especially alone. But it's necessary. The inventory must include your most important relationships, must account for how you treated the people who depended on you most. You think about your partner if you have one, whether you've been present, whether you've maintained the connection, whether you've taken them for granted or continue to choose them actively, whether you've grown together or grown apart, whether you still see them or just see a familiar figure who shares your space. You think about whether you've apologized for the times you were less than you could be, the times you were impatient or dismissive or unavailable, the times you prioritized other things, the times you forgot that relationships require active maintenance, not just passive coexistence. You think about whether there's still time to do better, whether the relationship can be revitalized, or whether too much damage has been done, whether you're both still willing to try, or whether you're just going through motions out of habit or fear of being alone. These are hard questions. They don't have simple answers, but the inventory requires you to ask them, requires you to look honestly at what you've built and what you've neglected, what you've nurtured and what you've allowed to wither. You think about your friendships, how many real friends you have, not acquaintances, not people you see occasionally, but actual friends who know you deeply and care about you genuinely. You think about whether you've been a good friend, whether you've shown up, whether you've listened, whether you've celebrated their joys and supported them through their sorrows, whether you've been reliable, whether you've been generous with your time and attention, whether you've made them feel valued, or whether you've been self-centered, only reaching out when you need something, only talking about yourself, only available on your terms, disappearing when it's inconvenient, taking without giving, expecting without offering. Friendship is optional. No one has to be your friend. They choose you and you choose them, and the relationship persists through mutual investment. If friendships have faded, you have to ask yourself why. What role did you play in that fading? You think about generosity, whether you've lived with an open hand or a closed fist, whether you've shared what you have or hoarded it, whether you've helped when you could or found reasons not to, whether you've been part of making the world better or just focused on protecting your own comfort. You think about your privilege, whatever advantages you've had. They might have been significant or relatively modest, but you had some. Everyone has some. The question is what you did with them. Did you use your advantages to help others or just to advance yourself? Did you acknowledge your privilege or deny it? Did you work to create more equity or did you protect the systems that benefited you? Did you use your voice to advocate for people with less power or did you stay silent to maintain your comfort? This is part of the moral inventory too. Your relationship to power and privilege and justice. Whether you've been brave enough to stand for what's right even when it cost you something, or whether you've prioritized your safety and comfort over doing the difficult work of making things more fair. You think about your work, not just your career, but your contribution, what you've built, what you've created, what you've left behind, whether your work added value to the world or just took up space, whether you did it with integrity or cut corners, whether you treated people well or used them as means to ends. You think about whether you found meaning in your work or just traded time for money, whether you showed up fully or phoned it in, whether you took pride in what you did or felt ashamed, whether your work reflected your values or violated them. For some people, work was fulfilling, a source of identity and purpose and connection, something that made them feel alive and useful and proud. If this was true for you, it counts as joy. It goes on that side of the ledger. You were fortunate. For others, work was suffering, necessary but soul-crushing, something you endured to survive, something that took more than it gave. If this was your experience, it's worth acknowledging, worth grieving. The years you spent doing work that diminished you, the creativity you didn't get to express, the potential you didn't get to realize. You think about your relationship with money, whether you were wise with it or reckless, whether you lived within your means or constantly exceeded them, whether you saved or spent, whether you were generous or cheap, whether you used money as a tool or let it become your master. You think about what you spent money on, whether those purchases brought lasting satisfaction or temporary pleasure, followed by regret, whether you bought things to fill emptiness that things can't fill, whether you confused having with being, whether you measured success by accumulation or by something more meaningful. You think about your health, how you treated your body, whether you cared for it or abused it, whether you listened to it or ignored it, whether you nourished it or poisoned it, whether you moved it or let it become sedentary, whether you rested it or pushed it past its limits. Your body has carried you through your entire life. It's done its best with what you've given it. It's healed when it could. It's adapted when necessary. It's functioned despite your neglect or your demands. Now it's aging, slowing down, breaking down in places, requiring more maintenance, less forgiving of mistreatment, more vocal about its needs. You wonder if you appreciated it while it worked well, if you were grateful for its service, if you treated it with the respect it deserved, or if you only noticed it when it caused pain, when it failed, when it stopped performing as expected. This seems like a small thing, but it's not. Your relationship with your body is intimate and lifelong. And like all relationships, it requires care, attention, gratitude. The inventory must include how you've treated this physical self that houses your consciousness. You think about your relationship with pleasure, whether you allowed yourself to experience it or felt guilty about it, whether you pursued it or denied it, whether you believed you deserved it or needed to earn it through suffering first. You think about whether you experienced pleasure consciously, savoring food, enjoying music, appreciating beauty, feeling sunshine on your skin, laughing fully, making love with presence, or whether you rushed through pleasurable moments without really experiencing them, always focused on the next thing. Never quite here. This matters because pleasure is part of being alive, part of what makes life worth living. If you denied yourself pleasure, if you lived in constant self-punishment, if you never allowed yourself to simply enjoy, then you missed something essential. You suffered unnecessarily. The inventory must account for this too. Whether you allowed yourself to be human, to experience joy without guilt, to rest without shame, to simply be without constantly achieving. You think about your relationship with nature. Whether you spent time outside or lived entirely indoors. Whether you noticed seasons changing or let years blur together. Whether you felt connected to the earth or separate from it. Whether you cared for the environment or contributed to its destruction. You think about whether you'll leave the world better or worse than you found it. What your ecological footprint has been. What kind of planet you're leaving for future generations. Whether you lived sustainably or consumed thoughtlessly. This is a moral question that earlier generations didn't have to face as urgently. But your generation knows. You understand climate change. You see the damage. You know the cost of how humans have lived. The question is whether you changed your behavior or just felt guilty while continuing harmful patterns. You think about your legacy, not in grandiose terms. You're not famous. You probably won't be remembered by history, but you'll be remembered by some people. Your children, your grandchildren, your friends, people whose lives you touched. What will they remember? What stories will they tell? What will they say about who you were, how you lived, what you valued, how you treated them? You can't control this entirely. People remember what they remember. They interpret through their own lens. They focus on what mattered to them. But you can influence it by how you live now, by what you prioritize, by how you show up, by what you say and do in the time you have remaining. The inventory you're taking tonight isn't just about the past. It's also about the future, about what you want the rest of your life to look like, about what you want your final chapter to contain. You can't redo what's done, but you can do differently going forward. You can apply what you've learned. You can live more intentionally. You can align your actions with your values. You can become more of who you want to be. This is the gift of the inventory. Not punishment, not shame, but clarity, understanding. The information you need to make better choices, to live more consciously, to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. You're tired now. The inventory has taken energy, emotional energy, mental energy, the kind of honest self-examination that leaves you depleted. But there's also relief. You've looked at the full picture. You haven't flinched away from what's hard. You haven't pretended you're better than you are, or worse than you are. You've been honest. This takes courage. And honesty is where peace begins. Not in perfection, not in having a spotless record, but in seeing clearly, in accepting what is, in releasing the need to be someone you're not. You did what you did. You didn't do what you didn't do. You were who you were. You are who you are. This is your life. These are your choices. This is your inventory. And you're still here, still breathing, still capable of change, still worthy of compassion, still deserving of rest. The night is deep now. The inventory is complete. You've counted the joys and the regrets. You've held them both. You've recognized that your life contains multitudes, that you're complex and contradictory and human. You don't need to resolve this tonight. You don't need to fix everything. You don't need to achieve perfect peace or perfect understanding. You just need to rest, to let your body restore itself, to trust that morning will come, that you'll have another day to try again, to do better, to love better, to be better. The inventory will be here tomorrow night and the night after. This is the work of being human, of examining your life, of holding yourself accountable while also extending yourself grace. But for now, it's enough. You've done enough. You are enough. Let your eyes close. Let your body soften into the mattress. Let the covers hold you gently. Let the darkness be a friend rather than something to fear. Your life has been imperfect and beautiful, painful and joyful, full of mistakes and full of love. This is the human condition. This is what it means to be alive. You've taken inventory. You've seen clearly. You've been honest. This is brave. This is important. This is enough. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.